Hello, my name is Anya Petrova. If you've ever experienced the profound betrayal of being disregarded by your own family, not merely misled by strangers, but actively erased by your mother in a public court setting, then perhaps you can comprehend my lack of surprise at her striking me. By that point, she had already deprived me of everything else, falsifying my legal name, selling the house I had been promised, and ensuring the entire community remained silent. But what my parents didn't anticipate was that my grandfather, my dear Dedushka, had left me the truth, and I'm finally ready to reveal it. Before we proceed, I'd like to know the time and your location, because by the story's end you might find yourself contemplating how your own family would react if you were the sole custodian of a truth they had buried for decades. The air outside the Superior Court building of Cook County held the sharp bite of early spring, a chill intense enough to cause teeth to ache, yet insufficient to dissuade people from pretending that winter had truly ended. I stood alone near the concrete steps, a marked envelope carefully folded in half and concealed within my coat pocket, as if it were a treasured secret. I hadn't seen my parents in several weeks, not since our last family dinner, where my mother had inquired whether I had finally chosen to pursue a more respectable career. I was completely unaware of today's hearing until a probate notification inadvertently arrived in my outdated email account, forwarded by mistake, information I was never intended to possess. With this thought in mind, I proceeded through the heavy glass doors. Every footfall on the courthouse floor resonated with an unnerving amplification. I secured a seat in the back, far to the right, far enough away to blend into the background, yet close enough to hear the proceedings clearly. Then, they entered, my family, as if it were a high-fashion runway show. Serafina, her heels clicking like a percussion section, her hair pulled taut in an almost painful style. My mother, impeccably dressed in her customary navy blazer, a garment she wore both to church and to funerals, and my father perpetually trailing behind, as rigid and unresponsive as a statue carved from silence. None of them acknowledged my presence, not even a single glance. Judge Evelyn Reed, a woman known for her calm demeanor and keen sense of fairness, cleared her throat, calling the hearing to order. She possessed the kind of measured, quiet authority that inspired confidence, someone who likely savored a black coffee without sweetener. Upon hearing the reading of the will, I harbored no expectations. However, I was unprepared for the mention of my name, not as a recipient of any inheritance, nor even as a minor footnote, but solely as a witness. Then, I encountered the clause that sent a chill down my spine. This document includes the signature of Anya and Petrova as verification, the clerk announced. The blood drained from my face. I had never signed such a document. Judge Reed turned her attention to me. Miss Petrova, is this your signature? My voice faltered. No, sir, it is not. My mother sharply exhaled. Oh, do stop it, she retorted. I never signed it, I repeated, this time with greater emphasis. The room fell silent, heavy, intense, as if everyone were holding their breath in anticipation. And then, she struck me her hand, connecting with my cheek with such force that I heard a collective gasp ripple through the courtroom. My mother, there, in front of the judge, the attorneys, the court clerk, and numerous onlookers, as if witnessing a scene from a television drama. You won't ruin this, she hissed. My father rose to his feet. Enough. You're making a spectacle of yourself. Serafina leaned in, her expression betraying a chillingly serene smile. You always ruin everything. Even now, she whispered. I was unable to respond, overcome by the moment. Judge Reed banged her gavel, announcing a brief recess. I stood, my cheek burning, not from the physical blow, but from the years of being deliberately excluded, the years of silent suffering. They had buried me long before this. I exited the courtroom without looking back. Outside, the wind had intensified, the temperature plummeting. I shoved my hands into my coat pockets, feeling a small familiar metallic object, an antique hair clip, a gift from my grandfather, on my 15th birthday. I hadn't worn it in years, but I couldn't bring myself to discard it. I clenched it until my knuckles turned white, standing there, the burn on my cheek overshadowed by the weight of the truth that others seemed unwilling to confront. I have no recollection of leaving the courthouse, only that I walked past pigeons, gathered on the steps, past a woman engaged in an animated phone call, past a young boy, holding his father's hand, swinging a toy gavel. By the time I reached my modest third-floor apartment in Pilsen, the sky had transformed into that familiar Chicago gray, the kind that magnifies the weight of everything. I dropped my bag, removed my shoes, and refrained from switching on the lights. The only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator. No calls, No messages, no apologies. I leaned against the kitchen counter, then proceeded to the bathroom. In the mirror, I appeared older, wearier than sleep could ever alleviate. My cheek remained slightly reddened, but it was the look in my eyes that captivated me. Not pain, not even anger, but the profound sorrow of realizing that I had never truly belonged where I had always believed I did. I placed the hair clip on the sink. The silver had dulled with time, but I could still discern the minuscule engraving on the inside, the number 12. My grandfather had once told me that it was my lucky year, stating that I had contributed more to the farm's success that summer than any adult. A sudden memory washed over me. I was 15 years old, sitting on his old porch swing, its creaks mimicking a tired canine with every movement. He held a twice-folded napkin in his hand. "I don't have much for girls," he'd said, "but I figured every young woman deserves something shiny now and then." Within the napkin was the very clip, simple silver, smooth edges, a clasp that closed with assurance. "Someday," he said, gazing out at the cornfields, "they will forget what you've accomplished. But not me, this signifies that I remember." Then, he looked at me with earnest sincerity, "And when I'm gone, don't let them push you aside. That house, it's yours, not because you're the youngest, not because I pity you, but because you earned it. Every nail, every box of nails you held while I repaired the roof, every pie you helped bake, even those with less than perfect crusts. You earned it." It was the only time he had ever expressed such sentiments. My grandfather was not a man given to emotional displays, but he never broke a promise. A knock interrupted my reverie. I peered through the peephole. Mr. Alvarez, my grandfather's next-door neighbor for over 30 years. I opened the door cautiously. "Good evening, Anya," he greeted me, his voice raspy as usual. I didn't want to call. I figured I'd just stop by. He offered me a small tin of conchas, my favorite, with their pink sugar crust still crisp, and a worn manila envelope. "Would you like to come in?" I asked, stepping aside. "I'll just stay for a moment," he replied. But he settled into a chair, as if his bones had been yearning for that particular cushion all day. He handed me the envelope. "Your grandfather entrusted this to me. He told me to keep it safe, saying that if things became complicated, I would know when to give it to you." I sat opposite him, the tin of pastries untouched. My fingers trembled slightly as I removed the letter. It was dated just 6 weeks before his passing. The handwriting was unmistakably his, cursive letters, uneven lines, but consistent. "Anya, if you're reading this, it means they've done what I feared they might. I want you to know that I altered the will. The house is yours. I filed it with my lawyer. The paperwork is beneath the drawer in the study, where we kept the old farm ledgers. They may try to dispute this, but don't let them. You earned this. You persevered. You showed up. That counts for something. Don't let their attempts to silence you drown out the truth. Dedushka." I swallowed hard. Mr. Alvarez observed me with gentle understanding, seemingly unsure whether he should speak or allow the words to hang unspoken. "Thank you," I whispered. I didn't know I always hoped he had noticed my efforts. "He did," Mr. Alvarez affirmed, nodding. "He told me all the time. He called you the quiet backbone, said you carried more weight than the rest of them combined." He patted his knees, then stood. "I'll leave you to it, but if you need anything, just knock." When the door closed, the silence returned, but it no longer felt empty. I turned to my bookshelf, retrieved a small box containing old documents. Tucked among receipts and expired coupons was a receipt from a large retail store, dated 6 months before my grandfather's death. It bore my full signature, including my middle initial, Juliana J. Petrova. The court document from that morning displayed, Juliana T. Petrova, the T, representing nothing, a letter I've never used in my life. I searched through my drawers and discovered more documents, bank statements, my college ID, a notarized lease agreement, all with the same signature, the J, consistently present. They hadn't even tried to be thorough. I sat at the kitchen table, spreading the documents before me. The more I examined them, the more I realized that whoever forged my signature didn't know me at all, not even enough to get the slightest detail correct. Yet, they had the audacity to erase me. I leaned back in the chair, my heart pounding, not from panic, but from a slow, deliberate fire igniting within me. If they intended to use my name, I picked up the hair clip from the sink, fastening it in place. I would remind them of who I am. They stole my name to obliterate me, but they failed to account for the fact that I was the one my grandfather trusted most. I didn't get much sleep after Mr. Alvarez departed. Every time I closed my eyes, that notary stamp flickered in my mind, hovering like a cheap tattoo superimposed on a lie. By morning, I was dressed, had gathered Grandpa's letter, and had paced the kitchen twice before realizing I was waiting for something that would never come, an apology, a message, even a pathetic "we didn't mean for it to go that far." But silence from one's family carries a specific weight. It's not simply vacant, it's definitive. The probate office of Cook County was situated across from an elementary school, making parking a challenge. I found a cramped spot and walked the 2 blocks, each step heavier than the last, not from uncertainty, but from the weight of finally deciding that I would not allow them to define me. The lobby buzzed with the hum of fluorescent lights and the worn texture of the old carpet. I approached the reception desk, holding my folder like a shield. "Hello," I said, offering a small smile to the middle-aged man behind the plexiglass partition, whose name tag read, Clerk Miller. "I'm here to access the probate file of Dmitri Petrova," I explained. "He passed away earlier this year. I believe it's now public record." He scrutinized me, seemingly weighing whether I had the right to make such a request. "Are you a relative?" he inquired. "Granddaughter," I replied, "but I'm not listed as a beneficiary. I simply need to review the record." He typed on his keyboard, then glanced at me again. "All right, review only, no copies." I nodded. "That's perfectly acceptable." He disappeared into a back room. Upon his return, he slid a thin manila folder through the slot. "Please don't remove the contents." I sat at the review desk near the window. The pages crackled beneath my fingertips. Court petitions, billing statements, witness lists, and then, the will. There it was again, my name, Juliana T. Petrova, the forged version, as sloppy as before. No one who knew me would have made that error. My middle name is Juliana. It always has been. I've never used a T in any official document, but it wasn't that detail that caused my stomach to clench. It was the notary stamp, April 14th, 3 weeks after my grandfather's funeral. My mouth went dry. They didn't just forge my name, they signed for a deceased individual, making him complicit in the theft of his own legacy. I leaned back, drawing a deep breath. The file trembled in my hands. Clerk Miller glanced over from behind the glass, probably assuming I was on the verge of tears. I wasn't. I simply closed the folder, slid it back, and whispered, "Thank you." He nodded but remained silent. Perhaps he saw something in my expression that suggested silence was the most prudent course of action. Outside, the wind was sharper than before. The Chicago spring still clung to its winter attire. I zipped up my jacket and walked 3 blocks to a diner I used to frequent with colleagues. It was a quiet establishment tucked behind a laundromat, with worn booths and waitresses who remembered your name if you tipped generously. I slipped into a corner booth. A waitress approached, her ponytail secured with a baseball cap. "Juliana, is that you?" I looked up. Brenda. We had attended high school together, sharing a history class. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. "Hey Brenda," I said, offering a weary smile. She grinned and raised a finger. "Right back." She returned with coffee before I even placed my order. "I saw the video," she said, lowering her voice. "That slap? It wasn't just about the will." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Brenda shrugged, pouring cream into a paper cup for another customer. "I remember your mother, your sister. They always needed someone to blame. A quiet girl, keeping her head down, the perfect scapegoat." I didn't respond immediately. Then, Brenda added, "That slap was to remind everyone who they think you are, the one who stays silent, the one who backs down." I stirred my coffee. "Then it's time I remind them who I really am." She nodded. "You still wear your hair clipped back like before?" I smiled faintly. "Not always. Just recently." We didn't converse much further. I finished half a sandwich, whose taste eluded me, and folded the receipt as I left the booth. "Wait," Brenda called from the counter. She hurried over and handed me my check, wrapped in a folded paper napkin, in the same manner that my grandfather used to wrap his gifts, simple and deliberate. I stared at it for a moment too long. "Hope things work out," she said kindly. I tucked the napkin into my jacket pocket, not out of necessity, but because some symbols don't belong to the past. They belong to the battles ahead. They erased his name, forged mine, and used silence to conceal their guilt. But I'm done being silent. The sky had turned a slate gray by the time I reached my house. Streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across the driveway where I once rode my bike, barefoot and carefree. Now, I stood at the bottom of the porch steps, not as a returning daughter but as someone reclaiming what had been stolen. I could see the warm glow from the living room window, shadowy figures moving past like apparitions. I removed the folded napkin from my pocket, placing it back in my coat before knocking. Once, firm and clear. It didn't take long. My father opened the door, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed as if anticipating a debt collector or a mistake. Upon seeing me, his lips tightened. "You've got nerve showing up here." I didn't flinch. "You have the nerve to pretend I don't exist." He moved aside slightly, indicating my unwelcome status, but he didn't slam the door. Not yet. Inside, Irina leaned against the archway, arms crossed, a glass of red wine in hand. Her nails were impeccably manicured. Her smile was even more so. "You should be grateful we didn't press charges," my father stated flatly. I met his gaze. "You should be concerned that I haven't." Irina scoffed. "Oh, come on. You think making threats makes you appear strong? It just makes you look pathetic." I stepped further into the house. "No, pathetic is forging a dead man's signature and submitting it to the court as if no one would notice." My father's expression remained unchanged, but Irina's fingers tightened around her wine glass. "You have nothing," she said too quickly. "Whatever theory you've concocted, no one will believe it." "I don't have theories," I said. "I have timestamps. I have probate records. I have a notary stamp dated 3 weeks after Grandpa's death." That was enough. Irina abruptly turned to my father, who avoided her gaze, instead glancing toward the front porch window, where a shadow shifted behind the curtains. Mrs. Davies, their nosy neighbor, always tended her porch plants at this hour. Tonight, she was likely eavesdropping. I positioned myself in the center of the living room. Everything was as it had always been. The same throw blanket, the same coasters bearing the Petrova monogram, but it no longer felt like home. "You used my name," I said calmly. "You used his as well, and you did so believing no one would challenge you." Irina opened her mouth, but I interrupted her. "I've already spoken to someone," I said, looking pointedly toward the front window. "They've seen what I've seen. You're merely hoping they remain silent." A muscle twitched in my father's jaw. Irina's wine glass remained suspended in midair, as if she'd forgotten its purpose. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," he muttered. "Don't I?" I retorted. "Because from where I stand, it appears you're the ones in trouble." He stepped forward. "Watch your tone. You should watch your actions," I countered. I removed the folder from my coat, placing it gently on the coffee table as a final offer. "You have 2 choices. Return what doesn't belong to you, or I'll see you in court, and next time, the judge won't just be witnessing a slap, she'll be signing an arrest warrant." Silence. It stretched, thick and suffocating, filling the room like dense smoke. Irina finally spoke, her voice frigid. "You're simply bitter that he didn't leave his estate to you." "He did," I affirmed. "He merely made the mistake of trusting that you would honor his wishes." She laughed, short, sharp, and brittle. "Do you think anyone will believe your word over mine?" "No," I said, reaching into my coat one last time. "But they will believe his." I removed the folded napkin from my pocket, walked to the coffee table, placing it atop the folder, in the same manner that my grandfather used to present birthday wishes or handwritten advice, always wrapped, always meaningful. "Irina," I said softly, "he used to write blessings on these." She stared at it, suddenly uncertain. "Let's see what you write," I added. When the blessings run out, I turned and left. The outside air felt different this time, not colder, but clearer, as if I had passed through fire and found the path waiting on the other side. By the time I reached my apartment, the adrenaline had subsided. My shoulders ached from holding them high, my spine locked in that defensive posture I had learned too early and worn for far too long. I closed the door behind me, allowing the darkness to linger before flipping the light switch. The room was quiet, too quiet, no echo of voices, no footsteps overhead, just the hum of the old refrigerator, and a draft seeping through the cracked window above the sink. I tossed my coat onto a chair, the crumpled napkin still within its pocket. The folder remained tucked under my arm. I laid it on the kitchen table beside my scattered documents and unpaid bills. Paperwork covered half the surface. Court notices, bank statements, old tax returns. It resembled a war room, and perhaps that's precisely what it was. In the bathroom, I gazed into the mirror. The slap mark had faded, but not entirely. A faint pink outline, still curved across my cheekbone, a bruise shaped more by memory than by skin. I slowly removed the remaining foundation, layer by layer, as if its removal could also erase the day. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, allowing it all to wash over me. The lies, the forged documents, my mother's hand, Irina's smirk, my father's silence. It felt as if my family had gathered every pain I had ever suppressed and transformed them into weapons. Tears welled up, not in a torrent, not with sobs, but with a quiet sting, as if something had finally given way after enduring excessive strain. I wasn't crying because I was weak. I cried because I was weary of being strong when no one else ever had to be. I don't know how long I remained there, but when I finally stood, the hallway outside was dark. The city had settled into its late-night rhythm. I boiled water for tea, but didn't drink it. Instead, I sat on the couch and retrieved an old shoebox from beneath the coffee table. Inside were newspaper clippings, report cards, a few faded photographs, and a birthday card from my grandfather, written in bold blue ink. There was one photograph I had always kept close, me at the age of 10, sitting beside him on the porch, my head resting against his shoulder, he in mid-laugh. I could almost hear it again, low and rich, like a comforting echo, and with that sound, the memory returned. We were sitting together on that same porch, on an autumn afternoon, when the cornfields behind his house still glowed gold. He was reading an article aloud about a corrupt politician, laughing at the naivete of those who believed no one was watching. Then, he looked at me and said, "You have a mind like a blade, Anya, sharp, but it's useless. Sheath your whole life. Use it when others refuse to play fair." I hadn't thought of that day in years, but now, I felt it, his voice enveloping me like armor. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. At first, I ignored it. Then, I saw the name, Aunt Svetlana. I hadn't spoken to her since the funeral. She had left the family years ago following a silent rift, one of those long-standing resentments that people stop explaining because it's easier than identifying the true source of the pain. I answered, "Anya." Her voice was a blend of grit and warmth. I watched the hearing. I swallowed hard. "Then you know." "I knew before they even filed," she stated. "You were never the favorite, but you were always the backbone." I exhaled slowly, unsure whether it was relief or heartbreak. "I inherited a drawer," she continued, "one your grandfather didn't want them to ransack. I found something, a signed draft of a trust, dated and witnessed, with your name where it should be." My pulse quickened. "What?" "I'm sending you the scanned copy. I figured it might come to this." He didn't want lawyers. He simply thought they'd honor it. "Well," I said quietly, "they didn't." She paused. "Anya, you're the last one who remembers what he wanted. Make them listen." We spoke a little more, mostly in silence. Then, I hung up. I opened my email. There it was, a scan, grainy but clear. His writing, his initials, his full signature, my name, not as a witness, but as the inheritor. Outside, muffled voices trickled through the vents, a teenager's voice, thick with frustration, and something deeper. I recognized it. Elisa, the girl from the apartment downstairs. Her mother had remarried last year, and ever since, I had noticed Elisa staying out later, walking more slowly on her way home. I opened my door. She sat slumped against the stairwell wall, her hoodie pulled over her head, her eyes red-rimmed. "Are you all right?" I asked gently. She didn't answer immediately. Then, she sniffed and wiped her nose on her sleeve. "My mom says I ruined everything. Says if I'd kept my mouth shut, he wouldn't have left." My chest ached. "I didn't say anything," she added, her voice cracking. "I didn't tell anyone." I sat beside her on the cold step, my hands folded in my lap. "Sometimes, silence allows them to win," I said. "I learned that the hard way." She turned to me, searching my face for something, proof, perhaps, that I meant what I said. "Do you think people actually change?" she asked. "No," I replied, "but sometimes we do, and that changes everything." He trusted me to carry the truth. Then, I paused. "So why am I still allowing them to speak over it?" I didn't get much sleep the night after Aunt Svetlana sent me the trust document. I kept replaying every conversation, every sidelong glance from Irina, every silence from my father, the kind that conceals more than words ever could. By morning, I was dressed in dark trousers and a navy cardigan, my hair pulled back, not out of vanity, but for a sense of control. I placed the original trust document in a plastic sleeve, slid it into a manila folder, and left my apartment with a clear purpose. I didn't bring a smile. I didn't need one. The Superior Court building loomed gray and imposing, beneath a sky smeared with clouds. Inside, I found the public records room quiet, almost solemn, the scent of dust and ink filling the air, as if it belonged to a bygone era. Behind the glass window sat Alina, her silver hair neatly arranged, her thick glasses perched halfway down her nose. She'd known me since I was 12. I used to sit outside her office, while my grandfather handled county permits for his property. She looked up, blinked once, then leaned forward. Anya, she said slowly. Are you all right? I offered a slight nod. I need to compare 2 documents. It's important. She led me to a small table in the back, the kind where clerks conduct more extensive file searches. As she retrieved my grandfather's will from the system's archive, I carefully unzipped my folder and laid out the version Svetlana had found. 10 minutes later, she returned, handing me a thin file with an unusual weight. I opened it and froze. The signature line contained my grandfather's name, but his middle initial was incorrect. More than that, his handwriting didn't match. I could spot the difference from across the table. My grandfather's penmanship had always slanted upward, even in his later years. The signature here sloped downward, flat and mechanical, and then, the notary stamp, the final blow. Dated 2 weeks after his death. Elena gasped. Oh dear, she murmured, pulling the file closer, checking the metadata printout. This was uploaded through the registrar's back channel, not the regular submission queue, she said quietly. Which means, someone on the inside. I finished for her. Elena looked at me, really looked. If this gets out, your family won't be the only ones panicking. This kind of backdoor edit. It doesn't just happen. I nodded once. My fingers tightened around the plastic sleeve containing the authentic trust. They forged his name, I whispered. They erased his wishes. And yours, she added. Don't let them. I left the courthouse mid-morning, the chill in the air doing little to alleviate the weight on my chest. By noon, I was home again. I locked the door, double-checked it, then placed both documents side by side on the kitchen table. That's when I heard the key turn. I stood still. 1 second. 2. The door creaked open, and Irina entered. She didn't say hello, simply dropped her designer tote on my entryway bench and let herself in, as if she owned the place. My stomach churned. She looked around, her eyes narrowing at the scattered documents. You're still living in this shoebox. Are you still trespassing? I asked. She walked to the table, then paused at the document. I'm here to save you from yourself. No, I said. You're here because you're scared. Irina crossed her arms. Do you really think anyone is going to believe some dusty draft from a disgruntled aunt? The court has already processed the will. I stepped forward, unwavering. I've compared metadata. I've spoken to Elena. The notary date is after he died. Irina flinched, only slightly, but enough. Then she smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. You don't want to dig deeper, Anya. If you go down this road, don't expect the family to support you. They were never supportive, I said. She tilted her head. You've always been unstable. Grandpa said so himself. You were too emotional to be entrusted with anything serious. I didn't blink. Then why was he whispering my name at the hospice? I asked, when he thought no one could hear. Silence. Irina shifted her weight, lowered her eyes for a second, then turned and walked toward the door without another word. The click of the door closing wasn't definitive. It was a threat veiled in silk. I sat down. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the fury I was learning to control. As daylight faded, I moved through the apartment like a ghost, folding laundry, watering a plant that hadn't bloomed in months, checking emails, and then I saw it, taped to my front door, white paper, a red stamp header, cease and desist, intent to pursue legal action, filed under the name Nikolai Petrova. No lawyer's name, no letterhead, no official seal. It was a bluff, a fabrication. I peeled it off, closed the door, and leaned against it. They were willing to forge documents, willing to fabricate legal threats, and still, they underestimated me. I walked to the living room, turned on the desk lamp, and picked up the authentic trust draft. My thumb brushed over the ink, over my name written in my grandfather's hand. You can threaten me with silence, I said aloud, my voice low, but you forgot, I know where the real record resides. I didn't answer the phone, I didn't open the door. When someone knocked at noon, I didn't touch the toast I had made for breakfast. I simply packed everything I possessed. Svetlana's documents, the forged ones, my grandfather's scribbled notes, and headed to the place that had always held the quiet truth, the public library archive on Halsted Street. The walk gave me space. The wind brushed through my sleeves, not as a chill, but as a reminder. I was moving forward. The archive room was cold, quiet, and overlooked, the perfect place to be forgotten, which is probably why my grandfather used it so often. I remembered coming here as a teenager, watching him flip through zoning ledgers with his glasses, perched too low on his nose, and a thermos of coffee in his coat pocket. Today, the shelves were the same, the corners dusty, the desk lamps dim, but in the farthest row, near the family deeds section, I found the record book he used to log entries under our surname. Petrova, property, medical, financial. Margarita, for when they pretend she never mattered. I took a sharp breath. My fingers shook as I lifted the paper and the binder beneath it. Margarita, my aunt, who hadn't been invited to a family dinner in over a decade. The one they called too soft, too poor, too bitter. She was the one he had entrusted this to. I called her from the library stairwell, my voice steady. Anya, she asked, cautiously. They told me you'd forgotten me too. I remembered you, I said. Can we talk? This is who carried me when they didn't show up. Below it were folded hospital receipts and wire transfer records. The charges were paid not by my parents, not by Irina, but by me. I remembered that night, emptying my savings, calling from my studio apartment, telling the hospital billing desk, yes, charge it to this card. No, I don't need a thank you. Back then, I hadn't done it for thanks. Now, I finally knew he had seen it. There was a letter too, folded into thirds, brittle at the edges. To Anya, they'll say you're difficult, they'll say you're wrong, but I knew which one of you stayed. Hold the line, girl, the truth resides in quiet hands. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. Instead, I looked up at Margarita. She nodded once. Go get them, she said. This affidavit is submitted without threat, coercion, or expectation, only with the belief that truth deserves to be heard. And then, I made the call to the state ethics office. Ma'am, the voice on the line asked, are you prepared for what comes next? Yes, I said. I was born ready for this. The next step was purely procedural. 100 a.m. as I sealed the last copy in an envelope and placed it by the door, I opened my phone. On the local news app, a gala live stream was already playing. Nikolai and Irina, arm in arm, smiling before a banner that read, Petrova Foundation for Legacy Growth. They posed, laughed, waved. Photographers snapped away. They looked like royalty, but royalty built on decay never endures. I turned off my phone, walked to my kitchen, and poured a glass of water with steady hands. They would smile tonight, but morning was coming, and I was bringing the light. Perker Seards opened the sealed submission file in the court's document management system. The courtroom screen flickered once, then displayed my affidavit time-stamped, watermarked, and secured by state encryption.